What's good, Ivy Nation? Welcome to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. I'm Vince Siderio. That's Bryan Driscoll. That is Trevor Trowbridge, and we are back for a great show. Frankly, we are continuing with our positional preview, and we are still on the defensive side of the football because there are more positions on defense than there are on offense. Position groups, I should say, and then we are going to roll into our next opponent preview, which is the Boston College Eagles. So we've got a lot in store for all of you today. It is Tuesday, July 22nd. How's everybody doing today, fellas?
I'm good. I'm ready to rock and roll. So it's been a interesting day over here, so I'm ready to talk some football.
There you go. Fair enough. Trev, how you hanging, man?
You guys know what it is. I'm always ready. I'm ready to dive into some safety talk.
There we go. There we go. So without further ado, let's jump into this safety group, guys. And, this is one of the more, we always talk about, okay, what position are you watching? What position battle are you paying attention to? All of those different things. And an easy answer to that question is the safety position. And it's the safety position, obviously, opposite Don Schuler, because it is wide open and there are some very large shoes to fill in that spot with Xavier Watts taking his talents to the NFL. And, what is that going to look like? A lot of I would say, steps forward last year in 2024, but then you lose an All-American like Xavier Watts. So can you continue that in 2025? I think, Bryan, is a massive question for the group. Obviously, we're going to jump into the specifics individually and all those things. But as a group, can they maintain the level that they played at in 2024?
Well, and it's important because this is not a position that has been as consistently good the last few years as the cornerback position has been the last few years. And not that it's been bad. It wasn't bad in 2023. It just was inconsistent because after Xavier Watts, I mean, you've had that one stud the last few years. You had Kyle Hamilton in 2021. You had Xavier Watts really especially break out in 2023, but he was good in 2022. But he really broke out in 2023. The safety position in 2022 was a very shaky position for Notre Dame because Xavier was dealing with a lot of his adjustment to the position. And, you had DJ Brown as a top guy. I mean, DJ Brown was your fourth leading, tackler on that team. You played Houston Griffith. Brandon Joseph was expected to be this big pickup from the portal. He was a giant disappointment that season as a player, and it wasn't a strength. So the cornerback position had its moments that year, but overall, I mean, it was pretty good that year. Cam Hart started to emerge. Benjamin Morrison was a freshman All-American 2023. Xavier Watts breaks out. He's a stud. DJ Brown was solid, but he wasn't an impact guy. And then Ramon Henderson was really spotty as a rotation guy. Just great athlete, but just not a real instinctive football player. And that proved to be a big problem for that team. And and we were, go back and look at the Ohio State game. Just two huge mistakes from the safety position on that final drive that allowed Ohio State to win the game. You have DJ Brown, who makes a great read, jumps the route, but then drops the interception. And then on the 3rd and long, Ramon Henderson's got his feet on the goal line, and he pedals into the end zone instead of squeezing down like DJ did on the other side. So, if you go back and look at that play and you watch what DJ did on the backside, if Ramon Henderson does exactly what DJ Brown did, that window's not there. He breaks it up. Maybe he intercepts the pass, and it's either Notre Dame ball or 4th and 23. And but he doesn't do it. And those things just happened way too much. There was a lot of missed tackles from the safety position. You fast forward to 2024, we knew that Xavier Watts was going to be really good. We didn't know what was going to happen other than that. Rod Hurd wasn't here in the spring. He was moving from nickel. You had a Don Schuler that we hoped could be good, but we hadn't seen him play meaningful down in football since high school. You didn't really know what to expect, and it was a strength of the defense, from the jump of the season. I mean, Don made his presence felt game one. We knew pretty early that Rod was going to be a solid backup player. Rod was as a backup what DJ Brown was as a starter the year before. And similar type of, not a difference maker, but he's going to do his job. And he was a very important pickup. So you had sort of that position where like, dude, this is a major strength of this defense. Now we're in a situation similar to where we were last year, but without the All-American returner. So we have expectations for Don Schuler, but he's got to improve a lot. Where with Xavier Watts, it was like, dude, just do what you did last year and you'll be fine. Now it's like a Don, like, okay, if you do what you did last year, they'll be okay, but you don't have Xavier Watts complimenting you anymore. So ideally, you need to raise your game up, but then who's going to start next to you? And there's all these question marks. So while there's the potential for this unit to be as good or potentially better than it was a year ago as an entire unit, I don't see anybody being better than Xavier Watts individually, but as a unit better, there's that potential, but there's a lot of questions before they get to that point where the potential turns into production. And so and it's important because it's such an important part of this defense. This position is in the modern offense, and this is what trips me out about the NFL. Maybe it's not true in the NFL, but in college football, the safety position is incredibly important. And people devalue it. Oh, it's not a prime position like left tackle, quarterback. Well, maybe not. But in today's game, man, the safety position is vital. And we saw that last year where Notre Dame exposed some other team safeties. And we saw that at Notre Dame in recent years when the safety position hasn't been filled with playmakers. And you have to think that if Don Schuler or if Xavier Watts is robbing down into the hole in 2023, you're thinking he probably picks that ball off just because he made those plays. If Jadon Blair is rolling down in the hole, if Tay Johnson, you'd like to think athletically they make that play. They haven't proven that they can make that play, but it's such an important position in college football as a whole against the modern spread offenses. Safeties are put in so many challenging positions, but especially in the Notre Dame defense, it's a vitally important position. And if you're not good there, your defense can't be elite. And we have hope that it's going to be good, but as of right now, it's still a very unproven group.
So, Trevor, talking about being elite and talking about this position being elite, we like to talk about what was lost. And this is one of the biggest losses on the team, frankly, from all of the different things that Xavier Watts brought to the table. But, why is he such a big loss, not only to the team, but specifically to this position group, like what he brought to the table and whatnot?
I mean, it goes back to what Bryan was talking about. And it goes back to going into 2024, we knew what to expect from zero on the back end of Notre Dame's defense. Now it's a little bit more of a question mark, but you look at everything that he brought to the table. And Irish Breakdown is currently rolling out their, impact players. Well, you want to talk about somebody that impacted the team in 2024 in multiple different ways, not just what his stat line was at the end of the season. That was Xavier Watts. And one of the bigger questions that we do have about this unit is, how is the room going to be cohesively when kind of the glue of that room is now playing for the Atlanta Falcons? Last season, you look at what he meant to this defense. He was a leader. He was a playmaker. He was dependable. I'm sure everybody in this chat, anybody that's going to be listening to this on the podcast channel, can go back and think of the number of times where Notre Dame's defense just kind of needed that stop and they needed to find a way to get the ball back. Who was always around the football? It was Xavier Watts. Even in some of the less flashy plays. Yes, you think back to, one of his 6 or 7 interceptions from 23 or 24. But I also think back to, plays against Georgia where there was an end around. The entire defense was flowing right. There was one guy who read the play correctly and was there to make the stop, so it wasn't a big gain, and that was Xavier Watts. Who steps up into that role? But, Bryan, I think you hit the nail on the head. In the college level, safety is such a valued position. It really is. One, specifically in Notre Dame's defense, how much Mike Mickens puts emphasis on the safety position. You brought up the 2023 Ohio State game. Safeties had 2 chances to kind of put the nail in the coffin in that game, and unfortunately, for different reasons, wasn't able to happen. But they're kind of the last line of defense, kind of thus the name of what the position is that they're playing. But they're playmakers against the run. They have important coverage responsibilities. Xavier Watts didn't get 13 interceptions in 2 seasons just by always miraculously being in the right place at the right time. Yes, you had to do your job, but you had to read the offense correctly. You had to have a really deep understanding of what your assignment was. And then they're communicators on the back end of the defense. You can go back and look at the Texas A&M game. first game starting for a lot of people, including their middle linebacker. And Adon Schuler and Xavier Watts, more specifically, Xavier Watts was one of the people that was helping getting people lined up on the back end of the defense. It's something that they're going to have to find some way to replace this upcoming season.
It was interesting with Adon last year. We'd be sitting there in spring practice and in fall camp, and we're watching Adon like bark out signals and bark out communication to other players. Vince, there was a spring practice in the stadium, and a linebacker made a mistake, and I think it was one of the veterans. I think it was Jalen Sneed, and Adon Schuler comes screaming downhill like he's trying to fill the alley to make a tackle, and he comes up to Jalen Sneed and he's like barking at him, not like you dumb, but just like, this is what dude, you got to know what you're doing here. This is what you're supposed to do. Like, this is a redshirt freshman who's never played a meaningful down, because that's just who Adon was. Do they have anybody like that in this room? Because what made last year's room so good is it wasn't just Xavier that was doing that, Trev, to your point. It was both of them were that way. Well, we know that Adon's going to be that way, but will somebody else kind of step into that? That remains to be seen.
It does remain to be seen. And I think that's, one of the biggest question marks. And not only, who's going to start opposite of Adon Schuler and all of that, but, whoever it is, whether it's one guy, two guys, three guys, or rotate, whatever the case may be, do they have that leadership, capability? Do they have that,
right?
All of those things that Xavier Watts, like, again, it's like Moneyball, right? You don't have to replace the individual, but you got to at least replace him in the aggregate. You know what I mean? You can have multiple guys doing it, but you got to replace it somehow if you want to stay at that level.
Right. And it's also, okay, how much better does Adon get compared to what he was last year?
For sure.
And then how can they match that bar? And then can they be better off the bench? Can they be as good or better than Rod Hurd? How will they fit into the new system? And so those are things that we'll talk a little bit more about in the big question standpoint. But that's why the safety position, guys, to me, is one where if you take away your feelings about the talent in the room and look at what you know beyond the talent, because even the talent, we don't know that it's going to thrive at Notre Dame because it hasn't had a chance to do so yet. Take away the talent, you have to be willing to admit that there's a lot we don't know about this position group. But then when you start thinking about but the talent, that's where you get fired up. And that's that really unique early pre-camp dichotomy you battle with, because you're like, I don't know this, I don't know that, I don't know that, I don't know this, but man, I love the talent in this room. And that's what starts getting you excited. It's like we're talking about all these, like, we don't know this, we don't know that, and and that, like, the show's kind of starting with like a, I don't know, and this is a concern, and then especially in part two of the show, when we start talking about the individual players, you're like, but Lord have mercy, there's a lot of talent in this room. There's a reason Kennedy Urlacher transferred, and it's not because Notre Dame didn't want to keep him. They liked Kennedy a lot. He's a talented football player. But he just looked at the room and was like, nope. Like, I'm already behind that guy, and this guy's passing me up already in spring practice. And, goodness gracious, it's a talented room.
Yeah.
Now we just got to see it kind of come together and play to their talent level.
Yeah. No, for sure. And it's so important that, like you said earlier, Brian, this safety position is so incredibly important for all of the reasons that both of you, listed out, specifically to Xavier Watts or generically to the position itself. It's incredibly important. I mean, for a myriad of reasons. And so they got to get this one right. And, obviously Mike Mickens is, for the second year in a row, is going to be in charge of the entire secondary with help from his friends. But, he is the buck stops with Mike Mickens, right? And we know he is extremely talented as a cornerback coach. We know he's an extremely talented coach, period, right? I feel like this is the first time at the safety position he's had a really big decision to make and kind of what that's going to look like. I'm kind of throwing you a curveball here a little bit, but
yeah, I don't know that I would necessarily agree with that, because I think we had a curveball last year. I mean, it may look back now like it was a no-brainer that Adon Schuler was going to start, but when we went into spring practice last year, that was by far a given. I mean, the expectation was that Rod Hurd was going to come in and be the starter at safety. And That's what they brought him in for. He was a guy that had 80-plus tackles the year before at Northwestern as their nickel. He had played 2,000 career snaps of football. He'd had some really impressive moments against some good teams, and it was like, well, Don's going to be the rotation, but how good is he going to be? I think there was even last year a little bit of a curveball last season in that regard. I think this year, Trev and Vince, it's more so. I don't know that it's less of a curve. I don't know if it's much as a curveball. Maybe, and Vince, if I'm not answering your question correctly, please follow up. But like, I don't know that it's a curveball. I think it's more of a, you guys know I love using movie quotes to like because in my head I'm thinking like this dramatic scene when I think about. You remember the scene in the first Godzilla where the Japanese scientist is talking to the admiral of it might have been a general of the army, as general of the army, and he goes, "Let them fight," and like that's where Mike Mickens is like, dude, let them battle, let them fight, and the winner will emerge, and he's going to be really good because in order to emerge out of that room, you better be pretty good, like if a guy's in a room and it's like, okay, y'all gonna battle, and whoever comes out of this room, and it's like Mike Tyson going against like Urkel and Screech and people like that, like or and not Mike Tyson, it's like or it's just some guy. You're like, well, I don't know how bad that guy really is because he beat up Urkel and Screech and like these small guys to get there, but it's like, okay, if you're in a room and it's like you got Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield, you get out of that room like that's a bad dude right there. And I think that's kind of where Mike Mickens is like, look, in order to win the starting job here, you better be pretty flipping good. And so then the question is, okay, well, who's gonna step up? Someone's got to start? Like we talked about quarterback, somebody's gonna start. But are you starting because you stunk the least of all the other guys that were battling for that position? Are you starting because of the three guys that were solid, you were the most solid, or are you starting because you walked in that room and you're like, kaboom, guess who stepped in the room? This is my room. This is my position now. And I'm gonna prove it every single day. That's a different thing. So I think that's a question mark, but I don't know that's a curveball because I think that's exactly what Mike Mickens has been recruiting, the way he's been recruiting to get to that point where it's like, hey man, like this is why I recruit all you guys. Who's gonna seize it, and then who's gonna say, okay, you may start, but I'm playing. You better play me not because I'm going to transfer, but you better play me because have you seen what I've been doing in practice? Hey, you better play me too. Hold on, so coach, don't forget about me because I've been balling out too, and that's what Mike Mickens hopes happens because he'll only play 3 safeties if he has to, but I think he'd like to get to more than that, especially because this team has aspirations of playing more than 13 games this year. They have aspirations of playing 15, 16 games, and they understand we're going to need that as we get through this thing. Did I answer that? Like, did I address that the way you wanted, Vince? Like, was it like true to your question?
No, 100%. I just wanted to kind of put out there that Mike Mickens has a really tough choice because there's so much talent. Essentially, you know what I mean? And I feel like you're right. Revisionist history. Don Schuler was the obvious choice last year. And, maybe that wasn't the case a year ago today, now that I think back on it. And you're absolutely right. But, man, what a great choice. So
he made it the obvious choice in fall camp.
Yes, he did.
And that was the exciting thing about it.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't because Rod Hurd was disappointing. It wasn't because Rod Hurd wasn't as good as they hoped he was going to be. I think Rod Hurd was exactly what they hoped he would be. That's why they had no problem putting him in clutch situations like the 4th down throw in the goal, in the red zone against Georgia. It just was, that's how good a Don was. And where in the past it was like, well, that guy played because so-and-so was disappointing and didn't play well or whatever. It was more so, hey, Rod Hurd was everything we hoped he would be. So was the Don.
Right.
and he was just the more talented player. So,
sure.
Yeah, I think that's what they're hoping for again this year.
Right. Absolutely. And there's the talent to talk about it. And we're going to get into these guys individually. But before we do, make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell, share with your family and friends, and join us on the boards, the premium message boards, at boards.irishbreakdown.com. There's some great stuff over there. It's a nice film breakdown of Sullivan Absher, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And so you get a little game film in there and a little bit of breakdown. So you want to check that out as well. But you only get that if you're a premium message board subscriber. And that is boards.irishbreakdown.com. It's where you find it. All right, gentlemen. So let's kind of jump into this depth chart a little bit and talk about what options there are. And let's be honest. Let's start with the guy who there is no question as to who is going to start. And we've kind of hinted around at it a little bit and talked about him a little bit more. And that's obviously Adon Shuler. And look, Adon Shuler took a massive step forward last year and cemented himself in the defensive backfield for Notre Dame for the foreseeable future, specifically in 2025. And, you know, what he brings to the table, fellas, is, I mean, he's got to basically jump into the shoes of Xavier Watts from a leadership standpoint and then just advance his game naturally from his first year starting into year two, Bryan.
Yeah, I'd say, you know, kind of before I dive into Adon specifically, I think that when you look at the safety position as a whole, what you just said about Adon, going from sort of he was Robin last year, and now he needs to be Batman. And then who's going to be Robin? And then who's going to be, you know, the next and the next and the next, right? Like, you know, there's a new Superman movie out. So you want to get in the Justice League, right? Okay, well, Don's going to, you know, he was not Superman last year. That was Xavier Watts. He's going to have to be Superman this year. Now, who's going to then step in and be, you know, who's going to be Batman? Who's going to be whatever? And I think that's where I do believe that the room as a whole is still an unsettled room because there are no certainties in the room. And what I mean by that is you're like, okay, well, we're about to talk about Adon Shuler and everything we expect of him, but all the things we're going to talk about are going to be things that we need to see from him that are even beyond what he showed a year ago. You know, like his leadership, I fully expect to be good. That's the one thing we know because he already shown that. He's an even more of a prototypical captain caliber player than even what Xavier Watts was, because Xavier was not a naturally vocal person. Adon is. And Adon has just that natural leadership ability, that natural confidence in himself, that natural understanding of I want all eyes on me when it's that moment. And I don't mean it as like a look at me kind of way, but more of a, hey, guys, we're good. Like what I mean, like eyes on me, it's like when you're in the huddle, I want all eyes on me and listen, guys, we're good. Here's what we're going to do. Here's the call. Let's follow me. You know, I think like if Adon was a military guy, he would just be a natural, like he'd be a general before anybody else in his, you know, class at the academy was, right? I mean, that's the kind of young man he is. But will the play match what you need it to match to be the guy at safety? And then you look at just the room as a whole, there is some unsettledness to the room, even when you look at it from an Adon Shuler standpoint, because we know he can be Robin, but can he be Batman? Like, I think that's where I look at it and say, I still feel like even as we get through this and we're going to talk about Adon or about the position battles, there is still a level of unsettledness to the room. But what I like, Trevor, is when you look at Adon last year, the one thing that was certain that you can take out of his season is A, he's going to be a leader for your team. B, this kid is a clutch, big moment type of young man. He just has a knack for making plays, and it just seemed like a lot of his big plays came when the team really needed it. Your offense is struggling to get anything going against A&M. Adon's right where he needs to be, makes a big pick. Your offense is struggling early against Georgia. Georgia just rips off a big throw to get the ball down the field. Who's the guy that comes in, sticks his helmet on the football, knocks it out? It's Adon Shuler. You know those two things. Now the question is, okay, but can he improve parts of his game that need improved? Can he become more of a force in areas where maybe he wasn't as much of a force last year and become sort of that star type of player for Notre Dame as opposed to just a really nice, like a really good complimentary player, which is what he was last year? Now the question is, can he raise his play and become a stud? He doesn't have to be Xavier Watts. It's about, can he become the best version of himself?
Can you be that in the moment, big moment, lights your brightest playmakers when you don't have Xavier Watts next to you? That's the Don Schuler's task for this season. And we've seen glimpses, to your point, even against Georgia Tech. Notre Dame's offense was kind of struggling to put the game away, even through, fake punt and blocked field goal, things like that. Don Schuler steps up and he records a pick six, kind of puts a nail in the coffin in the game, makes the lead a little bit too insurmountable. So, against Virginia, same thing. He returned an interception down inside of the red zone, set the offense up for a score. And so we've seen it in spurts. Consistency is going to be a big thing with him, not only just in the big moments, but also on an every down basis, limiting the missed tackles. That was an issue for him last season. I believe he ended last year with 23 missed tackles. And so 18 missed tackles. And so there's things that he has to kind of craft with his game. But on the bright side, last year, he was also a redshirt freshman starting. And so his trajectory for getting better, we can assume that he will just remain on the same trajectory. We've talked a lot this offseason about how his transition from where he was at as a true freshman in 2023, fast forward to 2025, where he's now in the limelight, it's almost kind of a picture-perfect scenario for him. He got to learn how Xavier Watts approached the game in 23 and had the opportunity to be taken under his wing in Xavier Watts' breakout season. Last year, he got the opportunity to be alongside of him and start for 16 straight games and learn how he attacked various offenses and how he would prepare and what he would do in game moments. And now it's your opportunity to do it without him there. And so that's kind of the ideal transition you want to see. But I'm with you. The room as a whole is unsettled. It's a good spot to be in because it's not a question of if they have the ability to. Now we just have to see the product on the field translate into the production that we think it can have. But yeah, Don Schuler is going to be the core of it. And his ability to step up into that spotlight week in and week out, that's the key, is being able to do it week in and week out is going to be huge for him.
I think what was interesting about Adon last year, guys, is he was a bit of a he had some very unique statistics. I'll just say that, in that you look at the 18 missed tackles, that's got to get a lot better. A lot better. He's going to definitely have to improve as a tackler. You look at Xavier Watts, for example. Xavier Watts had as many missed tackles last year, 13, as he did the year before with 13. Well, okay, did he get better? Yeah, because he had 262 more snaps, right? So like the percentage of misses to snaps played was much lower. Well, Adon last year in a similar number of snaps to what Xavier had the year before. Xavier in 2023 played 708 snaps. Last year, Don had 768. So he had 60 more snaps, but he had 5 more missed tackles than what Xavier had the year before. Well, Xavier added 262 snaps to his season total, and the number of missed tackles stayed the same. And they played 3 more games. So whereas the year before he averaged a missed tackle per game, which is about where Don was last year, slightly more than one a game, he raised that to less than 1 a game. That's got to get better. Adon is naturally going to be a guy that's going to miss some tackles because of his style of play. That's going to happen. But you've got to limit some of those. You've got to limit some of the out of control missed tackles where it's like, dude, you had that guy squared up and you just went flying out of control and missed him. Like, sometimes you're going to miss tackles because, number one, you're around the ball a lot, and the more you're around the ball, the more opportunities there is for missed tackles. The other part of it is, when I look at Adon, is it's you're going to have instances where the other guy makes a great play. That's just, Notre Dame plays pretty good players this year, and they're going to make the Notre Dame players miss at times. You're going to have missed tackles, but it's the out of control, it's the undisciplined, the technically undisciplined things that you look at and say, okay, that's got to get better. That's got to improve. And if he can do that, then that's where his game, I think, really takes off. And just that improvement alone makes Don Schuler a significantly better player. I think that's going to be key, because I don't anticipate, it was a very good question that was brought up in the chat is Adon moving into Xavier's position? And my answer is no, I don't think that he is. But I think his game is still better suited for the alley, but I am curious to kind of see, how does his role change? do they allow him to do more things in coverage than maybe they did the year before? I think that's a fair question, but I think his position won't change a whole lot. But with Adon, there's also some things at coverage he can get better at, especially when he's tasked with being in man coverage. Example is actually look at the blue gold game. Do a better job of, if you can't find the ball, try to ride that guy out of bounds. Do a better job of finding the ball. Don't let those big tight ends get their hands up and make those kind of plays. Now, part of that is those are phenomenal throws, but those are examples of, hey, you're a good player, but what's the next level for you is that you start making some, you start breaking up at least one of those two throws. I think those are the areas where if he just repeats last year, guys, they got a pretty darn good safety in Adon Schuler if he just repeats what he did last year. But if he can clean up the tackling, and if he can become just a little bit more effective making plays on the ball in coverage, and then also jumping routes to eliminate some of the throws where they would catch a ball on him and he'd tackle him, if you can eliminate some of those situations, then Adon's going to be a heck of a football player for Notre Dame this year. And I think we saw some of that improvement even last year from a coverage standpoint. Now the other part's got to improve, but we did see some improvements from him last year in coverage. I just want to see him take it to that next level this season and just be more effective playing in proper phase, jumping routes, getting more hands on the football, those type of things. And that's what he can do to take his game to that next level, to where he's not just a pretty good player in your defense, but a star player in your defense.
So at the end of the day, Adon Schuler is the known at this point. Now, there's obviously some unknowns as far as how he will progress and all of those things, but
he's the known because even if he just repeats last season, that's a good football player.
Absolutely. 100%. Yes. Thank you for putting it more succinctly than I was about to. But he's the known.
That's why I pay myself the big bucks.
That's the best line of the day right there. Just FYI, it's the best line of the day. So anyway, so Adon Schuler is the known. And so the best part is we get to talk about the unknown going into the 25 season, but the unknown is very, very intriguing. So we're going to get to that part next, Brian.